Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Vaishali Kaur. Today I am going to discuss a chapter named Resources and Development. This chapter is there in the geography book published by Cbse board. I am not preparing any note for the chapters of Cbse and West Bengal board because the books are published by the boards themselves. Only in case of ICSE board, I am preparing the notes by referring to a number of books prescribed by the board. So, if you still need the note of the chapters, then let me know. I will prepare them and share them with you. Now let us start with the discussion of the chapter. The name of the chapter is Resources and Development. What are resources? Everything available in our environment which can be used to satisfy our needs, provided it is technologically acceptable, economically feasible, and culturally acceptable, can be termed as resources. So, a resource is a substance which is used to satisfy human needs. But that particular substance should be technologically accessible, it should also be economically feasible and culturally acceptable. Only then that substance can be referred to as resource. Technologically accessible means that the technology needed to use that particular resource must be available so that we can extract it and we can also make proper use of it. Economically feasible, this term means that we should have enough money to extract that particular resource, and after extracting the resource, the economy should have or should gain profit from it. And culturally acceptable means that people should accept that resource and their sentiments or culture should not be hurt by that resource. Hence, a resource is any substance which is used by human beings to satisfy their needs, and that particular substance should be technologically acceptable, economically feasible, and culturally acceptable. Okay, only then that substance would be called a resource. Now see, a diagram has been given. This diagram shows interdependent relationship between nature, technology, and institutions. You can clearly see that triangle has been drawn to show the relationship between physical environment, that is nature, technology, and institution. And these three things are interdependent or interrelated through human beings. It is through human beings that these three things, physical environment, technology, and institutions, these three things are interdependent or interrelated. So human beings have been kept at the middle of the triangle. What this diagram is trying to tell us is that human beings, with the help of technology and institutions, extract resources from the physical environment or from the nature. Okay, so physical environment is required because from physical environment we derive resources. We also derive resources using technology and through institutions. Okay, and who does all these things? Who helps in extracting the resources? A resource would never be a resource unless and until human beings are involved in it. So a resource would never be a resource unless and until human beings are involved in it. Human beings only derive the substances from the natural environment. Then they use technology to convert it into another resource, or in order to convert the substance into a resource. They also make use of institutions while converting a substance into a resource. Okay, and in the definition only you can see it has been written that everything available in our environment which can be used to satisfy human needs are called resources. So from the definition only you can understand that human beings play an important role in the development of a resource. A resource would never be called a resource unless and until human beings are involved in it. Okay. Now let us move on to the next part. See, the process of transformation of things available in our environment involves an interactive relationship between nature, technology and institutions. I have already told you the relationship between nature, institutions and technology, and how this interdependence or interrelationship helps in developing a resource. Here in your book the interrelation has been explained, so let us give a reading. See, the process of transformation of things available in our environment involves an interactive relationship between nature, technology and institutions. Human beings interact with nature through technology and create institutions to accelerate the economic development. So I have already told you this, that it is the human beings who, with the help of technology and institutions, create resources. Okay, and they create resources by extracting a substance from the nature. Okay, and after extracting that substance from the nature, it uses technology, or the human beings use technology and institution to convert that particular substance into a resource. So I hope you have understood the explanation of the diagram. Now let us move on to the next paragraph. Do you think that resources are free gifts of nature as is assumed by many? They are not. So have you ever thought of this, that resources are free gifts of nature? Are the resources gifted to us by the nature as a free gift? No, they are not gifted to us by nature as free gifts. Resources are a function of human activities. Human beings themselves are essential components of resources. They transform material available in our environment into resources and use them. Yes, this is very important. Now, the resources or the substances which are available in the nature, those substances are derived or extracted by human beings, and the human beings convert the substances into resources. Why do they do so? They convert the substances into resources in order to satisfy their needs and demands. Okay, so resources are a function of human activities. Human beings themselves are essential components of resources. I have already told you that a substance is called a resource only when it satisfies the human needs. Okay, so human beings themselves are essential components of resource. Resources would never be called a resource, or a substance would never have been called a resource unless and until human beings extracted it, or unless and until human beings put that particular substance in their use. Okay, so human beings themselves are essential components of resources, and human beings transform material available in our environment into resources and use them. Okay, next, these resources can be classified in the following ways. Yes, we can classify resources on some basis. Okay, on the basis of origin, resources can be classified into biotic and abiotic. On the basis of exhaustibility, resources are two types. Resources have been classified into two types, renewable and non-renewable. On the basis of ownership, resources have been classified as individual, community, national and international. So on the basis of ownership, there are 4 types of resources: individual resources, community resources, national resources, and international resources. And on the basis of status of development, there are 3 types of resources: potential resources, developed resources, and reserve resources. Okay, please see a schematic diagram which has been given in the book. Resources can also be classified in this way. Resources have been divided into 2 types. The main 2 types are natural resources and human resources. Natural resources have been divided into 2 types: renewable resources and non-renewable resources. Then renewable resources have been divided into continuous or flow and biological resources. Then biological resources have been divided into natural vegetation and wildlife. See, non-renewable resources have also been divided into 2 types: recyclable and non-recyclable. Okay, and see here, human resources have been divided into 2 more types: structures and institutions, and quantity and quality. Now move to the next page. Here we will discuss the types of resources. The first type of resources, or the first basis on which resources have been classified, is on the basis of origin. Origin means source, from where we get it. So origin is the source of resources. So see, on the basis of origin, resources have been classified into 2 types: biotic resources and abiotic resources. Biotic resources, they are obtained from biosphere and have life, such as human beings, flora and fauna, fisheries, livestock, etc. So biotic resources are those resources which are obtained from biosphere, and these resources have life. Okay, some examples given are human beings, flora and fauna, fisheries, livestock. So these resources are called biotic resources because these resources, such as flora, fauna, human beings, fisheries, livestock, they are obtained from the biosphere and they have a life. Okay, now the main thing is, what is biosphere? Biosphere is that part of the earth where living beings live. I will discuss this thing with the help of a picture. Please see this picture. This picture is showing biosphere. Biosphere is that part of the earth where living beings live and thrive. You can clearly see that biosphere has included that part of the atmosphere where living beings are living. It has also included that part of the hydrosphere where living beings can live and are living, and it has also included that part of the lithosphere where living beings can exist and they are thriving. Together they are called biosphere. So it's that part of the atmosphere, hydrosphere as well as lithosphere where living beings can thrive and they can live. Next type of resource which has been classified on the basis of origin is abiotic resource. Abiotic resources are all those resources which are composed of non-living things. For example, rocks and metals. Rocks, metals, they are not having life, so they are non-living things, and all these resources which are not having life or which are non-living, together they form abiotic resources. Next, resources can be classified on the basis of exhaustibility. The word exhaustibility means property of being depleted. We know that resources can get depleted Because resources are limited in stock. Yes, all the resources are limited in stock, so they can get depleted if we overuse them. So on the basis of exhaustibility, resources have been classified into two types. They are renewable resources and non-renewable resources. Renewable resources are those resources which can be renewed or reproduced by physical or chemical or mechanical processes. Such resources are known as renewable or replenishable resources. So renewable resources are those resources which can be renewed or which can be reproduced or regenerated. So these resources which falls under renewable resources, those resources or these resources can be reproduced or they can be regenerated either physically or chemically or using some mechanical processes. Some examples of renewable resources are solar, wind energy, water, forest and wildlife. So water, solar energy, wind energy, forest, wildlife, these resources are considered as renewable resources and they can be regenerated or they can be reproduced by some physical or chemical or mechanical processes if they get depleted. Okay, so now see the last line. The renewable resources may further be divided into continuous or flow. Flow or continuous resources are those resources that will virtually always exist. For example, solar energy. Solar energy is continuous, isn't it? We will always receive solar energy because it will always be available to us. Solar energy will never get depleted. So solar energy or any other energy which or any other resources which will virtually always exist, those resources are called continuous or flow resources. The next type of resource which has been classified on the basis of exhaustibility is non-renewable resource. Non-renewable resources occur over a very long geological time. Minerals and fossil fuels are examples of such resources. These resources take millions of years in their formation. Some of the resources like metals are recyclable and some like fossil fuels cannot be recycled and get exhausted with their use. So non-renewable resources are those resources which cannot be regenerated. Why? Because they occur over a very long geological time. They take a long time to get regenerated. Examples are minerals and fossil fuels. Minerals and fossil fuels are called non-renewable resources because they take a very long time to get regenerated, and this time span is more than the time span over which we, the human beings, live. Okay, so once we exhaust a particular non-renewable resource, then we would not get that resource during our lifespan. Okay, and therefore that resource or those resources are called non-renewable resources. These resources take a very long geological time to occur, and these resources take millions of years in their formation. So you can see these resources, non-renewable resources, they take millions of years in their formation. So in order to form, they take millions of years. On the other hand, the human lifespan is only 100 years. A person can live 100 or maximum 110, 20. It depends from person to person. So it varies from person to person. Here you can see that if a non-renewable resource get gets exhausted, then that non-renewable resource would not be available to that human being, because his lifespan is suppose 80 or 100 years. Okay, so that resource would remain as a non-available resource to him, and he would not be able to use that resource. So non-renewable resources, which take millions of years in their formation, are called non-renewable because they take a lot of time, and this time is more than the lifespan of human beings, and for that reason only the resources which are classified as non-renewable resources are termed as non-renewable resource, because they are not easily regenerated. They take a lot of time. Some of the resources like metals are recyclable, and some like fossil fuels cannot be recycled and get exhausted with their use. So there are some resources which can be recycled, and after recycling their lifespan gets extended. For example, metals. If a particular thing which is made up of a kind of metal, if we are no longer using it and if we recycle it, then what we can do is we can use it for other purposes. We can use that same metal for other purposes. Okay, so what we are doing over here is we are extending its lifespan. We are actually extending the lifespan of that resource. We are reusing the same thing again, and that is how the lifespan of that particular resource has got extended. In this way, some resources can be used for a longer period of time. However, there are some resources like fossil fuels which cannot be recycled, and these resources get exhausted with continuous use or overuse. We can also classify resource on the basis of ownership. Who owns a resource? On the basis of that, resources can be classified. The first type is individual resource. Now, these resources are owned privately by individuals. Many farmers own lands which are allotted to them by government against the payment of revenue. So individual resources are those resources which are owned privately by individuals. Individuals own some resources, and those resources are called individual resources. For example, farmers own land, okay, and these lands are allotted to them by the government against the payment of revenue. So lands are given to the farmers by the government against the payment of revenues. Some lands are given to the farmers because the farmers in return pay the government some revenues against those lands. In villages, there are people with land ownership, but there are many who are landless. Urban people own plots, houses, and other property. Plantation, pasture lands, ponds, water in wells, etc. are some of the examples of resources owned by individuals. Make a list of resources owned by your household. Okay, so here it has been said that why the government provides some farmers with land. This is because there are some farmers who are landless, who do not own any land. There are some farmers who own land, but there are few farmers, or there are some farmers who do not own any land, and the government provides them with land. The government gives these landless farmers some lands, and against those lands the farmers pay revenue to the government. In urban areas, people own plots, houses, and other property. So these things are called individual resources. The properties owned by an individual, plots owned by an individual, houses owned by a person. These things are called, or this resource, these are called individual resources. Now, plantation, pasture lands, ponds, water in wells, etc. are some of the examples of resources owned by individuals. Yes, individuals can also own pasture lands, they can also own plantations, ponds, then wells. So wells, ponds, then pasture land, plantations, all these are called individual resources because they are owned by an individual. Now you can also make a list of resources owned by your household. So that's it. Move on to the next point, or the next type of resource which is classified on the basis of ownership, and it is community owned resource. There are resources which are accessible to all the members of the community. So there are some resources which are owned by all the members of a community. Okay, for example, grazing grounds, burial grounds, village ponds are owned by all the people of a community. So these resources are called community owned resources. They are owned together by all the people of a particular community. So village commons such as grazing grounds, just now I have told you that grazing grounds, burial grounds, village ponds, all these things you will get in villages. So these are village commons, and these things are owned by all the people of a particular village. So these resources are called community owned resources. In urban areas, public parks, picnic spots, playgrounds are the resources which are owned by all the people of the urban society or the urban community, and they are accessible to all the people living in urban areas. So public parks, picnic spots, playgrounds are the resources that you will get in urban areas, and these are owned by all the people of the urban area, that particular urban area, and they are accessible to all the people. So they are called community owned resources. Next is national resource. Now see, national resources, technically all the resources belong to the nation. So all the resources that we have studied till now, individual resources, community owned resources, all these resources are technically belong to the nation. Individual stay in nation, community stays, individuals stay in nation, then community stay in nation. So everyone live in a particular nation, isn't it? So the resources owned by them, owned by an individual or by a community, also belong to a nation. The country has legal powers to acquire even private property for public good. You might have seen roads, canals, railway being constructed on fields owned by some individuals. Urban development authorities get empowered by the government to acquire land. All the minerals, water resources, forests, wildlife, land within the political boundaries and oceanic area up to 12 nautical miles from the coast, termed as territorial water, and resources therein belong to the nation. Okay, so it has been said that all the resources are owned by a nation, okay, or belong to a nation. Individual resources, community owned resources, all these resources belong to a nation, and the country or the nation has legal power to acquire even private property for public good. I think you must have heard about this, that sometimes the government has taken individual property for construction of railway or roads or canals. Sometimes the government has done it, and the government can do this thing because it has got legal powers. Okay, it has got legal powers to acquire even private property for public good. You might have seen the roads, canals, railways being constructed on the fields owned by some individuals. Just now I have told you that you must have seen or heard it that government has acquired private property of an individual for construction of roads, canals, railways. The government has done it a number of times, and they can do it because, as I told you, that it has got legal powers. Okay. Now see, urban development authorities get empowered by the government to acquire land. Yes, it's the urban development authorities who has got the power to acquire individual lands. Urban development authorities take lands, the individual lands, and they have got the power from the government. The government has given them the power to acquire land from an individual. Okay, and that land would be used for public good. All the minerals, water resources, forests, wildlife, land within the political boundaries and oceanic area up to 12 nautical miles from the coast termed as territorial water and resources therein belong to the nation. So I'm trying to mark this point, but it's not happening anyway. So see, all the materials, water resources, forests, wildlife and land within the political boundaries and oceanic area up to 12 nautical miles or 22.2 kilometer from the coast comes under or belongs to the nation. So the property of a nation includes these things. The properties of a nation are all the minerals, water resources, forests, wildlife, land within the political boundaries and oceanic area up to 12 nautical miles or 22.2 kilometer from the coast. All these things belong to nation. All these things are the properties of a particular nation. The next type of resource which has been classified on the basis of ownership is international resource. There are some resources which are controlled or regulated by international institutions. Those resources are called international resources. Among those resources, an example would be the oceanic resources beyond 200 nautical miles of the exclusive economic zone. The oceanic resources beyond 200 nautical miles of the exclusive economic zone are regulated by international institutions and therefore they come under international resources. The oceanic resources which are present beyond 200 nautical miles of the exclusive economic zone belong to open ocean, and no individual country can utilize those without the permission of international institutions. Okay, so the oceanic resources which are found beyond 200 nautical miles of the exclusive economic zone belong to open ocean. Do not worry, I will tell you what is this exclusive economic zone or what is meant by exclusive economic zone, but for the time being just understand this, that the oceanic resources which are found beyond 200 nautical miles belong to open ocean and no individual country can utilize those resources. Okay, they can utilize by taking the permission of the international institutions who regulate them. Okay, now I will tell you the meaning of exclusive economic zone. Exclusive economic zone, as prescribed by United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea in 1982, is an area of the sea from the baseline to 200 nautical miles from the coast of a nation, from where that particular nation can extract marine resources. This right of a nation, which has been granted by United Nations through United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea to extract resources within 200 nautical miles from the baseline of that nation is called exclusive economic zone. This picture shows the exclusive economic zone of India. This is the exclusive economic zone of India. I hope you can see it. This is the exclusive economic zone of India. Okay. Now, exclusive economic zone is an area of the sea which extends or which stretches from baseline, that means from here, okay, to 200 nautical miles from the coast of the nation. So it extends from the baseline to 200 nautical miles. Okay, I hope you can understand it, that exclusive economic zone is an area of the sea which stretches from the baseline or from the coast of the nation to 200 nautical miles of the sea. Now, exclusive economic zone as prescribed by United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea in 1982 is that area of the sea where the nation has got exclusive right or special right to exploit the oceanic resources. So India can exploit oceanic resources within this part of the ocean. So India can exploit the oceanic resources of exclusive economic zone which stretches from the coastline of India till 200 nautical miles of the sea. Okay, I hope you have understood the meaning of exclusive economic zone. An interesting fact has been discussed as, do you know, here it has been said that India has got the right to mine manganese nodules from the bed of Indian Ocean which lies beyond the exclusive economic zone. It has got a special right to mine manganese nodules from the bed of the Indian Ocean, and this area lies beyond the exclusive economic zone. So it lies beyond 200 nautical miles. Okay. Resources have also been classified on the basis of development. That means at which stage of development a particular resource is lying. On the basis of that, resources have been classified. So resources have been classified on the basis of their stages of development. The first type under this is potential resource. Potential resources are those resources which are found in a region but they have not been utilized. For example, the western parts of India, particularly Rajasthan and Gujarat, have enormous potential for the development of wind and solar energy, but so far these have not been developed properly. So potential resources means there are some resources which are present on earth or inside the surface of the earth, but those resources have not been utilized or they have not been developed or they have not been put to use. Those resources are called potential resources. For example, the western parts of India, particularly in Rajasthan and Gujarat, you will get in the western parts of India, particularly in Rajasthan and Gujarat, you will get solar and wind energy, and you will get them in enormous amount. Okay, but so far these resources have not been developed properly in these areas which have been mentioned in your book. So it has been said that in western parts of our country India, particularly in Rajasthan and Gujarat, there are tremendous amount of wind and solar energy available, but these resources so far have not been developed properly or have not been utilized properly. So these two types of resources come under potential resources, but these two type of resources come under potential resources because they have not been utilized properly in India. There are some other countries or there are some other parts of India where these resources, wind and solar energy, have been used and they have been utilized, or they are being utilized properly. There they are not considered as potential resources. They are considered potential resources only in Rajasthan and Gujarat because they are available in tremendous amount in these two places, but there they have not been properly utilized. Okay. Next, developed resources. Resources which are surveyed and their quality and quantity have been determined for utilization. The development of resources depends on the technology and level of their feasibility. So, developed resources are those resources which have been utilized, which have been developed. Their quantity and quality have been increased. Their quantity and quality, both these things, both of these two things have been improved or increased, and this has been done by doing survey or research. Okay, and therefore those resources whose quantity and quality have been improved or have been increased are called developed resources. The development of a particular resource depends on technology and level of their feasibility. So that means that if a technology is there through which a resource can be developed, then that resource will obviously be developed. And if it is economically feasible to develop that resource, if it is possible to develop that resource economically, or if people are willing to spend money, or people have enough money to spend on the development of that resource, and in return that resource gives profit, only then that resource would be developed, isn't it? So development of a resource depends on the available technology, and it also depends on economic feasibility. Okay. Next is stock. Materials in the environment which have the potential to satisfy human needs, but human beings do not have the appropriate technology to access this, are included among stock. For example, water is a compound of two gases, hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen can be used as a rich source of energy, but we do not have advanced technical know-how to use it for this purpose. Hence, it can be considered as stock. Okay, so stock refers to those resources which can be used to satisfy human needs, but there isn't any appropriate technology available which can be used to develop that resource. Okay, so for example, water is a compound of two gases, hydrogen and oxygen. We know this, that water is a compound which is made up of two gases, hydrogen and oxygen, and hydrogen can be used as a rich source of energy. Hydrogen is a very rich source of energy, and it can be used as a source of energy, but we do not have sufficient technology or advanced technology to use it for generating or to use it as source of energy, or to use hydrogen as power, okay, or as a source of energy. So here it can be considered as stock. Okay, so hydrogen is a very powerful source of energy, but we do not have that technology to use hydrogen as source of energy, or through which we can use hydrogen for generating power. So in this case it will be considered, or it can be considered as stock. Okay, next, reserves. See, reserves are the subset of the stock which can be put into use with the help of existing technical know-how, but their use has not been started. This can be used for meeting future requirements. River water can be used for generating hydroelectric power, but presently it is being utilized only to a limited extent. Thus, the water in the dams, forests, etc. is a reserve which can be used in the future. So reserves are those substances which remained as stock for a certain period of time. Then with the development of technology, they have been changed into, or they have been transformed into resource, or they have been developed into resource, but we have not yet started using those resources. This can be used for meeting future requirements. We have not started using it because we are planning to use them in the future. So those resources which have been developed as a resource with development of technology, but we have not yet started using it, those resources are called reserves. River water can be used for generating hydroelectric power, but presently it is being utilized only to a limited extent. Thus, the water in the dams, forests, etc. is a reserve which can be used in the future. An example has been given. River water can be used for generating hydroelectric power, but presently it is being utilized only to a limited extent. Thus, the water in the dams, forests, etc. is a reserve which can be used in the future. We already know this, that river water is being stored behind the dams in order to produce electricity, and also for using that water for various other purposes. But the water is being utilized only to a limited extent. Okay, thus the water in the dams, forests, etc. is a reserve which can be used in the future. That's it. I have decided to stop here today. So this will be the first part of this chapter, and if you like my video, then do hit the like button, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel, and also press the bell icon, because if you do that, then you will get notification as soon as I upload any videos. So that's it. Till then, take care, and I will meet you again in my next video.